Today, we'll uncover the epic Winston Churchill tried to personally destroy, the Oscar-winning doc the BBC locked away for 20 years, and the brutal drama that even James Bond couldn't save. Failure wasn't the final verdict. These are 10 British war films that were buried at the box office, only to become masterpieces. Forget the romantic image of the dashing World War I flying ace. The reality was a bottle of whiskey and a 2-week life expectancy. That is the cold, hard truth at the center of 1976's Aces High. Backed by a respectable $3 million budget, this Anglo-French production based on the seminal British stage play Journey's End came loaded with talent, Malcolm McDowell, Christopher Plummer, and still failed to find an audience. The reason is simple. It refused to sell a lie. This isn't a film about heroic dogfights. It's a claustrophobic psychological drama about the systematic grinding down of young men. They aren't knights of the air. They're terrified boys, numbing their fear with alcohol while waiting for their turn to die. Watching it, you can almost feel the bone-deep chill of the barracks and the ever-present stench of dread. While other films celebrated the spectacle of aerial combat, director Jack Gold focused on the terrified faces inside the cockpits. The stunningly realistic flight sequences aren't there for thrills. They serve to underline the terrifying mechanical reality of the job. Its commercial failure was the price of its honesty, and its legacy is its reputation as one of the most authentic depictions of the Royal Flying Corps ever put to film. It told the truth about being a pilot in World War I, the glory was a lie and death was a near certainty. Richard Lester's 1967 film How I Won the War is one of the strangest gambles in British cinema. It took the most famous musician on the planet, John Lennon, and cast him not as a hero but as a footnote in a surreal nightmare. This pure British production should have been a hit. Instead, it was a box office disappointment. The studio thought they were getting a John Lennon comedy. What they got was a chaotic, avant-garde attack on the very idea of war films. It's a surrealist black comedy that constantly breaks the fourth wall and presents a bleak, absurdist argument against war. Watching it now, you can see the blueprint for Monty Python. That same smart, chaotic energy. It's not an easy watch, but its absolute refusal to play by any rules is what makes it fascinating. Once dismissed as a curio for Beatles fans, it's now rightly seen as a key, experimental film of the swinging 60s. A surreal trip that used the world's biggest rock star to prove war is the ultimate bad joke. How do you follow up one of the greatest Last Stand movies ever made? The answer, it turns out, is to show the catastrophic failure that made The Last Stand necessary. That's the brutal premise of the 1979 prequel, Zulu Dawn. Bankrolled with a budget of over $8 million, this prequel was meant to be an epic. Instead, it was an unequivocal box office disaster that vanished. Its crime? It deliberately betrayed the heroic fantasy of the original Zulu. Helmed by British director Douglas Hickox, this isn't a story of a triumphant last stand. It's a meticulous, cynical account of the arrogant military blunders that led to one of the British Army's most humiliating defeats. There's a sense of impending doom that hangs over the entire film. The film methodically lays out each mistake, building a case for the disaster like a prosecutor's closing argument. Time has been incredibly kind to it. Its historical accuracy and anti-colonial perspective are now seen as its greatest strengths, making it a far more interesting and modern film than its celebrated predecessor. The audience wanted heroes. It gave them a history lesson, a bitter pill, but a necessary one. Some films flop, others get buried, but a select few just disappear, becoming cinematic legends whispered about by those in the know. That's the story of 1971's The Last Valley. On paper, this was a prestige picture, a hugely expensive 70mm UK-US epic pairing two absolute titans of the era, Michael Caine and Omar Sharif, and adding a majestic score from John Barry. In reality, it was dumped by its studio and vanished. The film cost $6 million and earned back less than $1 million in US rentals, a colossal bomb by any measure. The problem wasn't quality, it was the subject matter. It's a dense, philosophical film about the 30 Years' War, a brutal conflict audiences neither knew nor cared about. It offered moral ambiguity and questions about peace when the market demanded simple heroes and villains. There's a strange, haunting beauty to it, A sense of weary stillness that's completely hypnotic. For years, it was a ghost, a film you heard about but couldn't see. Rescued from obscurity by home video, it's now celebrated for its stunning visuals and what many consider a career-best performance from Kane, a cinematic ghost in 1971, a certified cult classic today. Imagine a jaunty seaside musical where the final number is the death of an entire generation. That's the bizarre, brilliant tightrope walk of Richard Attenborough's 1969 directorial debut, Oh, What a Lovely War. Backed by Paramount's British arm with a multi-million-dollar budget and an all-star cast, this film was a commercial dud that failed to cover its costs. It wasn't a conventional narrative, it was a surreal, theatrical satire. Attenborough used cheerful wartime songs as a bitter soundtrack to the slaughter of millions. It was an abstract nightmare about the absurdity of war, and audiences expecting a straightforward story were completely alienated. The whole film is this strange, often horrifying experience, but nothing prepares you for that final pullback shot. It's an image that burns itself into your memory. What was once a baffling flop is now celebrated for its audacity, a truly unique and deeply moving statement on conflict, precisely because it refused to play by any known rules. Its surreal logic was out of step with 1969. Its haunting final frame is forever. Instead of a reverent historical epic, director Tony Richardson delivered a cinematic Molotov cocktail aimed squarely at the British class system. The film was 1968's savage and satirical masterpiece, The Charge of the Light Brigade. Financed by Richardson's own Woodfall Film Productions with a massive $6 million budget, the film was a financial catastrophe, earning back less than half its cost and flopping disastrously in America. This wasn't the celebration of military valor audiences expected, it was a vicious autopsy of incompetence. The film fundamentally attacks the patriotic myth, portraying the military elite as clueless, pampered aristocrats leading men to a pointless slaughter. I find the use of jarring, satirical animated sequences inspired by Victorian cartoons to be a stroke of genius, constantly reminding you that this tragedy was born from absurdity. It was a deeply angry and cynical film, released in an era when audiences were looking for escape, not a bitter history lesson. Its reputation is now secured, seen as a key text of the British New Wave, and a clear precursor to Kubrick's Barry Lyndon. It aimed for the establishment's throat and missed the audience entirely. History proved its aim was true. Richard Attenborough's 1977 epic, A Bridge Too Far, is what happens when you assemble the greatest cast in movie history, give them a colossal budget, and make a film about a spectacular military screw-up. This UK-US co-production had a huge $26 million budget and barely broke even, making it a massive disappointment for investors. Its ambition was the problem. What unfolds is a sprawling, clinical account of Operation Market Garden, an Allied disaster. It deliberately avoids having a central hero, mirroring the logistical chaos of the actual battle. Its refusal to hold your hand is brilliant. It trusts the audience to understand that war isn't a simple story. But in 1977, audiences wanted triumphalism, not a deeply pessimistic epic about incompetence and bad luck. The very things that made it a tough sell are now seen as its greatest strengths, cementing its legacy as one of the most intelligent large-scale war films ever made. Its scale was immense, its honesty was brutal, and its downbeat conclusion arrived a decade ahead of the market. Sidney Lumet's 1965 masterpiece, The Hill, is the ultimate bait-and-switch. It took the most famous movie star on the planet at the absolute peak of his fame and threw him into hell. With Sean Connery at the height of his 007 fame, this Anglo-American production should have been a slam dunk. Instead, on a lean budget of just over $1 million, it was a box office disappointment, earning a paltry $650,000 in US rentals. Audiences wanted the glamour of Bond. What they got was a sweat-soaked black and white drama about the systematic sadism in a British military prison. No gadgets, no glory, just the methodical breaking of men. The filmmaking is so claustrophobic, you feel trapped right there with them. Its commercial failure was the price of its artistic integrity, and it now stands as the prime exhibit for Connery's immense dramatic talent beyond the tuxedo. People wanted a spy. Lumet gave them a soul-crushing portrait of hell. The right choice was made. Peter Watkins' 1966 docudrama The War Game isn't just a film, it's a piece of evidence. It's the film the BBC paid for and then immediately banned for 20 years because they were terrified of what it showed. Produced for a shoestring BBC budget of around £7,000, its failure was institutional, not commercial. It won an Oscar from a limited cinema run, but was deemed too horrifying for broadcast. Watkins used cold, hard newsreel techniques to depict the aftermath of a nuclear strike on Kent. The vision of societal collapse and radiation sickness was so brutally plausible, the government feared it would cause mass panic. Even watching it today, it's profoundly unsettling. It has this gritty, nightmarish quality that gets under your skin, and you can see exactly where the makers of Threads, nearly 20 years later, got their playbook from. The ban, of course, only made it a legend, turning it into an essential tool for anti-nuclear movements and a landmark of political television. So powerful, the government classified it as a public threat. You can't get a better review than that. In the middle of World War II, the most powerful man in Britain tried to personally destroy a movie. That movie is Powell and Pressburger's 1943 masterpiece, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. Budgeted at over £200,000, a colossal sum for a British film then, its real enemy wasn't the box office, but the government. Winston Churchill saw its sympathetic German character and critique of military tradition as a threat to morale. He tried to ban it, blocked its export, and the version that finally reached America was butchered beyond recognition. It was establishment sabotage on a grand scale. While the country demanded simple propaganda, Powell and Pressburger delivered a sweeping humane epic about a 40-year friendship between an Englishman and a German soldier. What's staggering is that under all that pressure, they made one of the most beautiful-looking films of all time. The Technicolor is just breathtaking. It's a profoundly sad and wise film, and that quiet humanity is probably what scared the politicians the most. Rescued from obscurity and championed by directors like Martin Scorsese, it has outlived all its critics to become a cornerstone of world cinema and one of the greatest British films ever made. The film Churchill couldn't kill is now a national treasure. That's the ultimate victory. So there you have it. 10 films that prove the box office is just the first draft of history. The real story is the one that endures. A special thank you to Club VintageVerse members. You're the executive producers, and your names are on screen now. If you want to join them, the link is in the description. Subscribe for the next deep dive. We'll see you then.